Brody, how are you, sir?
Excellent.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming in today. You very kindly, we got connected through the Farm Bureau because you have a really unique situation with your property and your ranch and what you engage in. But we were trying to get connected. You were coming into town because you don't live close by, and you actually changed your travel plans and drove 6 hours a day earlier than you're planning so we could meet this morning. I really appreciate you for coming in.
Glad to do it.
This is the deal. You have grizzly bears crawling over your property like cockroaches.
Literally. Yeah, literally.
You're also a fish and game commissioner, one directly appointed by the governor. There are 7 of you. You have, and again, as we're chatting, as I find with most people, nobody really has a problem with wolves and grizzly bears in the abstract, right? Like you're looking in a wildlife book. It's not like you see a grizzly bear, you're like, it's like, look, these are fine animals. Like, right. God bless them, right?
Right.
But from a practical standpoint, when that kind of wildlife and that kind of risk is around your, not just your business, which I think a lot of people understand there's a tension on public lands.
Sure.
With
cost of doing business.
Right. Cost of doing business. You got to run cattle, you got to run livestock, and hey, you got animals there that are looking to eat them as well. But when we transfer out of just like a purely business mindset to, hey, my kids play in my yard.
Yes.
Grizzly bears can run 45 miles an hour.
Yes.
Like they could clear a distance that I couldn't see them in a matter of seconds to get at one of my kids. That's when we start realizing that, hey, look, from a person to person standpoint, we need to understand and deal with this interface of apex predators and just Idahoans in the absence of arguments around ranching, just dealing with Idahoans in a better way. Yep. Help me understand what your experience has been from the start. Has this ramped up in recent years? Is it something that the state has a handle on? Like, just give me the whole thing.
I'm 48. We've been at this forever. I think the grizzly bear got listed before I was born, early 70s, I think during Nixon administration, and something we've lived with forever. You talk about them being kind of fun to see. I hadn't seen a grizzly bear for the first part of my life. I've seen the remnants of what they could accomplish, but year by year it gets ramped up and more ramped up. And, we're only, don't quote me, 10, 15 miles out of the Yellowstone National Park to the south there and southeast or whatever. And then we got wilderness areas, we got national forests before we get to our private ground. And then we run cattle on that public forest and have for 7 generations or, well, long time.
Long time. Whoa.
Easy killer. And so, but like the last 2 years, it's just absolute. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say 2 years. We've had problems for 20, but manageable, And the last 3 years, it's just between the wolves and the grizzly bears, especially the grizzly bears, the last 2 or 3 years, it's just like they've came out of the woodwork. And sometimes you like to blame it, low bear year, dry year, this and that. And obviously those affect things, but we are so overpopulated with them. And it's from where I sit and where I stand and live, it's just like, how come this isn't common knowledge to the rest of the world? Like, do they have any concept of what is truly going on out there? It's they said cockroaches. That's kind of a funny thing. Last year, 2023, we had 8 grizzly bears on my phone. People don't believe me. And rather than call them a liar, I just pull out my phone. Oh yeah, here's 2. Here, these 2 are over frolicking in my hayfield. These 2 here were next door to the squirrel store, within literally 50 yards of 2 of my neighbor kids playing. They didn't know they were there. And there's 2 adult grizzly bears just out there being Yogi Bear. The same day, 2 more, literally 8 miles away on a horse ride. Neighbor seen them, took a video of them playing. Within a week, there was 2 more, possibly the same 2, in a spud field in the county next to me. I wouldn't tell you they're chasing the pipe movers out of the spud fields, but the pipe movers sure didn't want to go back, to move their pipe without help. It's just crazy things that had happened. We had 2 walked into a rancher's storage unit. They ended up, I think they had to eliminate them too, but I mean, they were just everywhere. It was like going to Yellowstone Bear World and you didn't have to pay. It was, and they're fun to see until you realize that they can be in your yard in 15 minutes and they maybe have been there. You go and you call the authorities and past years, and they tell you, well, you need to clean up your yard, which might mean an apple tree in your yard. And all of a sudden, I'm pretty big on private property, and you have somebody come into your yard and say, you can't have an apple tree, or you shouldn't have that, you're like, are you kidding me? This is an agricultural state. This is my farm. I'm paying property taxes here. What gives you the right to tell me what to do? And back to, we all enjoy wildlife. Well, we have Yellowstone National Park. It's a huge, huge Huge place and beautiful place. And then we got the Jedediah Smith Wilderness area right next to me. We got the Grand Teton National Park right next to me. And these are all within, literally, I can be in any one of them three things in 15 minutes from my house, maybe 30 at the tops. And all those are protected areas in which we have wildlife, grizzly bears, wolves, all these wonderful things. And yet now they're flowing out into our national forest, which I guess could be considered a good buffer zone in my mind. But then they hit private ground and they call that a recovery area or whatever they want to call it. You know,
interesting.
Everybody has these different terms they like to use, and I call it my property. I call it, I pay that property taxes. I own that ground, and I manage that ground. It's mine. It's my family's to manage. It's our private. And so I feel like there's so much, being a livestock guy, if my cattle get out, and cattle get out, livestock get out, that's just part of life. The first thing you do, you get a call from the sheriff's office if you're a little late getting there, and hey, you got cows out over here on the highway. That's a problem, and you deal with it promptly, and you go take care of it. And, your neighbors, you keep good fences, and you do all this work to keep your livestock in. But it seems like with the federal government, oh, well, that's just the way it is, Grizzly bears can come down, and I have a neighbor, big old grizzly came into their place this year. It's a nice little pasture. He pays his taxes on every year. He runs 15, 20 little cows in there, and it's just a little wonderful place he has. Well, this grizzly bear moved in, made residence. He had to pull his cattle out, and nobody told him to. He did it voluntarily because that wasn't going to end well for anybody, So you got a choice to make at that point. Do you commit a felony and defend your cattle? Do you pull your cattle out of the place? And is it worth that risk, by the way? Why is it our burden to take care of these things? Why isn't that just naturally taken care of from the government standpoint? If that's their mentality, why, when my cattle get out, I don't call somebody and say, hey, can you go get my cows in? I do, actually. I call my employees and they go take care of that, if I can't myself. So why is that any different from a standpoint of the government? Why is it okay for them to run their grizzly bears or wolves all over our private property, take residence, take it over? That pasture was completely useless all summer. That bear just was more than happy to stay there. And why was that bear there? Because the population's so drastic that they can't, they don't get along well with each other. They like to have their own space, and they don't play well with each other. And so when the bigger one kicks the other one out, then the other one moves down the roadways and sets up homesteads, I guess you might say. And that's where we're at. It's just completely overpopulated. It's a problem.
A question for you, and again, please excuse me, I'm ignorant to a lot of these nuances, but can you explain? Okay, so the grizzly bear got listed before you were born as an endangered species, and with that comes a lot of specific protections. Like you can't, in the absence of direct and imminent threat to life, you essentially can't engage them.
Absolutely.
So they walk around. You ever play like Mario Brothers?
No, I'm not a gamer.
You never played Nintendo back in that, or whatever. You are familiar. There's a thing called Super Mario Brothers, right?
Yeah, my friends had it. I just had to go work.
There we go. Okay, fair enough. Well, like you get the star and you're invincible, right? And you're like flashing and everything. So essentially, the grizzly bears, wherever they walk around, they could be on your front porch. They could be, obstructing your business operations. It doesn't matter. They are invincible.
They're the king
to anything, unless. I was having this argument, not an argument, a discussion with somebody about drunk driving. And they're like, what if you're driving down the street and you're drunk as a skunk, but you're going 25 and a 25, you're using your blinkers, you're doing all these things. Like, why is that illegal? It's like, well, because the possibility of death and damage to other people that can't defend themselves is really, really profound, right? Like you could be drunk as a skunk driving 25 and black out a second later and crash into somebody's front yard, like, and kill them or kill somebody pedestrian, right?
Sure.
And I was literally having that conversation like 5 o'clock last night. This appears to be the same thing, which is, hey, look, I understand that this grizzly bear is important. We've deemed it important or valuable for a number of reasons. And one of those is population, right? Just gross population numbers within the United States. We don't have that many of them. That's fine. But it also carries with it this imminent, instantaneous possibility of death and like extreme damage. Like, what has been the history of reintroducing or cultivating this population within the area, right? Because if it's on this long trajectory to like, we're going to bring back grizzly bears. You said in the last couple of years, have we hit like a spike with population?
Don't quote me on dates because I'm not familiar with the dates, but these have been delisted twice already. Once in the last Trump administration, once before that. We just have a judge put them back on. Population, that's a great argument to have. Numbers I hear in this job I have here in Boise, I think we admit we have 900 just in this greater Yellowstone area. And I'm a little dangerous on my stats, so don't call it doctrine, but we admit that.
Just sign this paper.
Yeah, seriously. I think our recovery goal, don't quote me once again, was 500-ish. We admit we have 900-ish. Do we have them all tagged, registered? Know what we have? Absolutely not. We have no clue. We're getting good intel. The Fish and Games does a wonderful job trying to, collect this data. And they're very proactive on that. We want primacy over these bears in the state of Idaho. This doesn't need to be federally regulated anymore. We've got, my numbers are different than the Fish and Games, and mine are just my own mind, but we've well over recovered this thing 3, 4, 5, 10 times what our numbers need to be. What the goal the government gave us to recover them. I think the government said we need 500. Well, we blew past that a long, long, long time ago. And yet we've weaponized this Endangered Species Act to, do all sorts of damage with it. And it's such an industry of its own. It's agriculture, it's school, it's education, it's all these things. It's its own business. It's its own
kind of industry.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you. There's so many people that are involved with grizzly bears, good people that are monitoring, making sure they were reintroduced. And one question I always wonder, if I was on that side of this fight, and just love these bears with all my heart, why are we not touting the success of the Endangered Species Act? Like, they hit a home run. They've nailed it. And I think 72, they started them in there. Why aren't they beating their own drum in their chest saying, look at what we were able to accomplish because of this Endangered Species Act? But they've yet to admit that we have recovered them. They have yet to delist them. And when we do delist them, they put them right back on. You got one judge says, nope, that's not the way it's going to be. They're endangered. And yet no scientific basis for doing so. It's just emotional. Crazy, crazy time.
Yeah. And you touched on something that is a real problem with a lot of things of this nature, which is who's managing it? Is it a federal management? Is it a state management? And even within the state, as you're pointing out, like, listen, the population in the state may be whatever it is. But from my perspective, right, if we have 50 grizzly bears in the state of Idaho and 49 hang out on your property,
right,
you got a real problem with grizzly bears. And everybody else is saying, no, there's no problem. We need to get more of them. Right. So again, as we go down in perspective from federal government to state, even to local government, we have problems with management because, again, if you have a hyper-localized population, that exacerbates problems. But wolves and grizzly bears are things that have suffered from, or at least Idahoans have suffered from, federal management and federal,
absolutely,
I don't want to say manipulation, but control of the species, whereas state governments and state organizations like, listen, let us, like, tell us the number you want,
and let us get out of the way,
and then let us get after it. Right? You want 300? You want 500? I'll give you 500.
Yeah,
but then, like, you pick the number. We'll track them. We'll do what needs to be done to get as accurate head counts as we can get. But beyond that, let us go to town to make sure that we hit your target 100%. And get mad at us if we don't, but we'll hit your target. Just let us take care of this so 100%. That we don't have to deal with these, again, grizzly bears next to the swing set.
Yeah, and it's the nuttiest thing, because if we've done everything you just mentioned, ironically, and I'm new at some of these parts of this thing, but the state of Idaho, don't quote me on this percentage, we're probably paying somewhere between 50 and 90% of this grizzly bear burden with the state of Idaho tax dollars. Okay. Why? We don't have primacy over them. We don't have any control over them.
Back up there. We pay 50 to 90% of the management and dealings with grizzly bears, even though we don't have control over any of this.
No. When a grizzly bear comes in your yard and it needs to be dealt with, the Fish and Game is the ones that respond. The Fish and Game are the ones that do all the management of this. They've got multiple employees that I've met, wonderful men, actually, great guys, and that's their job. And the whole purpose of this, if I understand this correctly, I'm 1 year into this job, is to show the federal government that the state of Idaho is well capable of managing, dealing with these numbers. You hit it on the head. They picked the number. I want to say it's 500 grizzly bears they want. We know we have over 900 that we admit to. And when I say admit to, that we have solid evidence, maybe a collar on their neck, whatever that is. They DNA test them. They're tracking their whole thing. We got genealogy on these bears, so we know what their histories are. And by the way, we're finding new ones every day when they're out there hunting. Every day, I don't want to exaggerate, but constantly finding new bears. And as a rancher, I see that. I see these bears. They don't have collars. The 8 bears I seen, none of those had collars that I'm aware of. So so do we count that in the 900 the Fish and Game say we have, or do we count that in the 500 that they want, or is that the Brody Harshbarger number of way more than that? Who knows? They've weaponized it, so then now where does it go from there with our populations? And how does it affect our whole state? It's not just a rancher issue. So often I get wrapped up in it because I am a rancher and a farmer, and it affects me so directly that maybe it doesn't you. But did you tell me you're on the PTA?
Oh yeah. So I'm a state PTA member. Look at that.
So but it affects you, and it affects the spud growers. It affects the water users. It affects Idaho Power. They've used this tool to affect all of us, our lives. And when I say, you're like, well, how does it affect the PTA? Well, it affects the PTA in that there's no logging going on anymore. I mean, very little. Our logging industry in my region is 10%, not even that, 2% of what it was when I was a kid. When I was a little kid, logging in our hometown was as big an industry as agriculture is. It was huge. There was multiple loggers. There was trucks every morning. The Forest Service was hopping. We had 2 or 3 machine shops in town overhauling things. We had a chainsaw shop in town doing it. I mean, it was an industry. The grocery store was selling lunch meat to every logger heading out of the timber that morning, and it was a big deal. Multiple sawmills in the area getting things done, and that is all gone. There's one little local sawmill. There's 2 loggers in my county that I'm aware of that actually you can consider make a living logging. So, and that comes back to PTA. How? Well, I'm a little dangerous on my terminology. I only call it PILF payment in lieu of, and the federal government, when they take away that logging, they give the schools that money. Well, that's just more tax burden,
Right.
And all that industry's gone. And so now it affects our education. And so where does that money come back to? Like I said, I'm just dangerous enough to be knowledgeable enough to be dangerous on some of this. But
I think your point is really well made. When you go to more rural areas, like I was talking to Representative Steve Birch last week or the week prior. I don't know. All the days blend together. Yeah. But the point is, he brought up a real crisis of education support in Salmon, because Salmon has a middle school. There's a state highway that runs down the middle of this area. Salmon has a middle school that's brick and mortar, has everything you'd expect, cafeteria, all the things. And across the highway, they have these portables that are for the elementary school. Yep. Now, the portables don't have plumbing, right? So when you have a 5-year-old or 6-year-old who's like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom, this kid has to, in the dead of winter, go outside, cross a state highway, go into another building just to use the facilities. Yeah. And that's and one of the big problems with Salmon is that it didn't have the tax base to support building more things. So they have figured out some ways to address some of the problems there, but it comes with huge volunteerism in the community. Sure. So you have contractors and laborers that are volunteering time and materials, and you have and it's a beautiful story of a community coming together, but at the same time, it's a gigantic failing of the state apparatus that's supposed to stand by those salmon children. Right. It's like, if you're a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, it's like, where's the state helping me just get bathroom facilities?
And the thing that's frustrating is the ability is there. We have the resources to do those things naturally. Our natural resources are there to accomplish it, but our hands are tied. And once again, back to the grizzly bears, or the wolves and whatever it is, how does that affect our local, just in the area I live in, and I'll just call it a 1 or 2 county area. We had a meeting not too long ago, and I was invited to it on I wear my rancher hat, not necessarily this Fish and Game hat. And we lost over $250,000 of cattle amongst 15 ranchers. Now, that's just the ranchers lost that $250,000, okay? Now, can we attribute every one of them, guarantee it to a grizzly bear or a wolf loss? No, we can't. But there's so much more than just the dead cow laying on the range that you can't prove what killed it. It's did that cow reproduce? How many pounds were ran off that poor thing because it wasn't contend? I mean, I know I winter a lot better in the winter when I'm not being chased around, when my wife's feeding me good. I put the pounds right on, and cattle are the same way, and we're selling pounds in that. But I don't even want to talk about the cattle side of it. That's just, my point is that one little thing, how many dollars does that affect into our economy that aren't being able to, as a rancher, whether I'm paying that into taxes or whether I'm just being a good community member and being able to go donate to the local PTA or the Booster Club or the FFA or you name your organization you're trying to support and help with. All those dollars are robbed and gone because of that, let alone the taxes that comes from our economy, and then the imports that come in from out of state, that's just one of many, many things, and then that affects the water. How are we getting the water back into the creeks out of the forest? Every tree drinks this much water. Trees are wonderful. Love them. Do we have more trees than we've ever had in our world? Yeah, absolutely. We haven't logged in our area I bet they haven't had a timber sale in my county for 30 years. That was worth mentioning. Wow. That's all that's gone. And so the water ain't coming in the creeks. And
if I may ask, that specifically regarding the timber industry, we're going through a mass. I had Director Dean Cameron, who's the director of insurance for the state of Idaho, on last week. Great conversation. And the Department of Insurance is doing everything it can to maintain a healthy insurance market in the state of Idaho. It is not trying to nationalize or socialize the insurance companies. It's not trying to tell private businesses what they can and can't do, as some other states have done in the past, not successfully. It's not a good thing to do. But they're trying to incentivize insurance companies and make Idaho a profitable and beneficial place for insurance companies to exist. And he was bringing up wildfires. He's like, listen, we had a horrible year last year. It's going to be worse this year. And I was like, wait, why? And he, articulated why. And it's like, oh my gosh. And so here you have these huge problems with federal management of lands, with destruction of timber industries. And I had Charlie Lyons on, who was he was the origin of the rangelands fire protection associations, where essentially you had ranchers who were like, listen, we need to be able to fight these fires that are destroying our pastures, that are destroying our homes. We can rely on outside agencies to some degree, but at the end of the day, these are our spots, right? And there's this whole, very difficult thing to actually affect and do. But the point is, you have all of these problems that come from fire and accessible fuel. And not only do you have lack of taxes, but then you have insurance burdens where the insurance companies are like, hey, we'd love to insure you, but your house is 500 yards from a gigantic matchbox. Yes. We're going to cut your insurance. So you have all these things that homeowners are attempting to do you make their home insurable. Right. But at the end of the day, it's listen, the more fuel, the more ability for this entire area to just erupt in flames, the more expensive insurance is going to be. And at some point, if it gets bad enough, insurance companies just decide, hey, look, man, love you, would love to have you over for dinner, but I cannot, from a business standpoint, I cannot insure you. It's too risky. And so you lose the tax revenue, you lose the industry, you lose the
efficiency,
the whole thing. And then you just make it harder to even function with homeowners insurance.
Absolutely. Just more cost, and it's not just a statewide issue. I mean, because honestly, talk about cattle eating the grass off, taking our fuel loads down, logging, thinning those timbers out, keeping them managed, all the benefits that come from the things, but let alone then the other side of that, is the insurance. And you watch these raging wildfires we have in Southern California right now. Well, insurance works the same way. That's going to affect yours and my home rates, depending on what company we're with and where they've invested their money. But I'm with a company that insures all over the nation. They're local, they're Idaho, but they buy chunks of insurance. They spread that risk out. Hey, let's buy a little bit of Florida. Let's buy a little bit of Massachusetts. Let's buy a little bit of California to spread our risk out. Well, guess what? My homeowner's insurance is going to go up this much, possibly because for California just lost how many homes? 10,000 homes burned up. I don't know.
Those were not cheap homes.
No, exactly. And they're insured. And So you and I'll pay that. And why is that? Because they didn't, sure, they haven't had a rain since last April, but what did they do to negate any of that stuff in that state? No reservoirs, just a mess. And their management of that state, and we're guilty of the same things in a lot of ways, not being more efficient and better stewards of the things that we're being given on this earth to do.
Yeah, I heard a pretty dark humor joke about how anybody who got a ticket for parking in front of a fire hydrant should have the fee reimbursed because there was no water in the fire hydrants anyway.
Yes, seriously.
It's pretty dark, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, look, fair point, man. Like there was, nobody was coming to help. So being that you're a fish and game commissioner, you're in a unique position to, one, be charged with kind of addressing these things, but you also are not this like, bloodthirsty rancher who's like, oh, screw it all. Like, you're charged with maintaining figuring out how to maintain fish and game operations within this state. So like, what do we do? What do we do, not just from an honoring the species standpoint? And again, I know I'm not trying to be inflammatory, but it's like, listen, I don't hate grizzly bears in the abstract. Right? I don't hate wolves in the abstract. No. I had Justin Webb on from Foundation for Wildlife Management, and he spoke so favorably of wolves. He was just like, but the carrying capacity of this area is not right. Like, we're full. Like, in fact, we're over the limit. And that's going to lead to, as you were pointing out with grizzly bears, as you crowd populations and you increase carrying capacity or go over carrying capacity, those animals are going to disperse because they need different resources. That's right. They got to have room. That's going to lead to more interactions in rural and urban communities. They're not going to be favorable interactions. You're going to have more disease and more problems. And the excess, one thing that he really pointed out that I really hadn't thought about, he's like, the excess of these species, like big game, they're for us, right? Like, we do everything we can to make sure that they have a population that can reproduce to a certain degree and shed off a little extra. Because if they can't reproduce to a sustainable level and we hunt them, well, then the population is going to shrink. He's like, but we need just enough excess that they don't start harboring disease and problems, and we can pick off some of them, 20, 30,000 per year just for us. And it's the same thing with our natural resources. Like, we have a certain amount of timber. We have a certain amount of land for grazing. Like, we need that excess resource for us. Like, I'm human first, right? It's like, absolutely. A grizzly bear, wolves second. Like, but I'm human number one. So how do we get it so we can harvest that excess natural resource? Let's just take, lands without cattle. Without grazing. This was one of the big problems with Lava Ridge. If you take that 200,000 acre property where they were going to put all these windmills and you make it a giant construction zone, like, is somebody going out to mow the lawn? No. Like, are you like,
do the weed control?
Right. Nope. Like, how we need the excess natural resource to be managed, and ranchers are one of the best spots. Not only do they manage it, they also, like, the ground is taken care of when you have hundreds of cows that come through, chew it up, poop it out, like, animals are good, reseed, the whole thing. The ecosystem is far better. Just like when we had bison roaming. Like, 100%. That's what the ecosystem
better than that, because we're managing it, because we're making our livelihood off that. People, you're out there raping the ground, you're taking all the grass, you're trumping the riparian areas. Bull crap. That can happen. I'm not saying there are people that are guilty of those things, but for 99% of it, the farmer, the ranchers are the best stewards of the land, because we literally make our living off of that property. We're the only ones paying to be there, and we're making our living. We need to manage that resource to the maximum of its potential and maintain it, or it's gone. You can't cut every tree down, you won't have any forest left.
Right. So just by the nature of you saying, whoa, just by the nature of you acknowledging, look, I don't need a paycheck today. No, I don't need a paycheck next week. I need a paycheck forever.
I want to trim it. I don't want to skin it.
Right. And we need this land to do that. So you're the most incentivized steward of that land, or you even pay to be steward of the land. So recognizing all of this and seeing your position in fish and game, like, how do we start untangling this knot? How do we start managing?
Local control, and being involved. Obviously, this isn't my dream job. I'd rather be home right now, working on doing the other 8 hats I wear. And
come on, this isn't that bad sitting here.
No, sitting here is fine, but I'm just and actually, there's a lot of good enjoyment coming from the fish and game. But just sometimes you get so overwhelmed with dealing with the federal government, for instance. Why are these bears being managed by the federal government now? Why can't the state of Idaho have control of this? We're doing all the work. We're proved we can do it multiple times over. Why isn't that being handled on a local and state level every day? And the worst part about this is it will become handled on a local level in manners that we don't want it accomplished in, and I'm not saying anything threatening. I'm saying like when these bears start coming down and wolves start coming down. Last week we had bears walking down Yellowstone, West Yellowstone. A friend of mine called and said, "You won't believe this. There's a pack of wolves walking right down the street, just like a bunch of tourists going to get a hot dog, craziest thing ever." And Yellowstone's a unique place, West Yellowstone. They're right against the forest there. But like those kind of things, how does that get dealt with? Eventually it's a public safety issue. So then that comes back even more so on our county levels. The sheriff's offices are going to be dealing with these phone calls because it's a public safety issue. It just needs to be handled on a local level, managed on a state level, like you talk about these numbers. And if the federal government wants to have a little say in the matter, that's fine. But they're not even paying the bill. I mean, don't misunderstand me. They're wasting billions of dollars, probably millions anyways, on things that don't need to be taken care of anymore on their level. But it's such a huge industry on their part. I don't feel like they can let go of it. I don't quite understand. But then I come back to my little more right-wing thinking. Well, they've weaponized it. It's affecting everything in our state. It affects power. It affects education. It affects taxes. It affects our livelihoods. It affects so many things that people don't realize that, I mean, you probably never thought of it from a PTA standpoint, but
I did not.
It's a huge problem, and it would be fascinating to see how many dollars the state of Idaho has to spend on education if we had our logging managed the proper way, if it was an option. But they we can't do that. That's grizzly bear habitat. Oh, that's a situation one area. We can't, what? Like this is our national forest. I'm not talking about logging Yellowstone National Park or Grand Teton Park. Let it go to waste, as far as resources. If we've set it aside, we've well managed that, that side of that argument. They have a happy place to be and good for it. It's fun to see those. I love going to the park and driving through and seeing all the different things that have been put here on this earth for us to enjoy. I don't understand why it has to be in my yard. And then I get told, well, we'll be here to take care of your kids. Don't worry about it. No, nobody takes care of my kids but Brody. That's my job.
And you can't. I mean, just the response time.
What
do you mean? Like, I have a problem in 15, you're going to be here in 15 seconds? You're drinking lemonade in the kitchen? Like, what do you mean you're going to be here?
Yeah, sir. Well, I just built a new home last month and moved in, and Tuesday night I had a little chimney fire in it. And I'm best friends with our fire chief in Ashton. I called him personally on his cell phone because I'm a little bit private. I didn't want to have to call 911 and have the whole county show up to help me put out this little. It wasn't even flaming. It was a small thing. And my good friend threw his pants on at 10:30 that night, called his buddies, and within 30 minutes. And that's a great response time, by the way. It sounds horrible, but within 30 minutes, I had 10 fire trucks in my yard. They all showed up at the same time, and we went to work. And I was well on top of it at that point. But my point is, it was 30 minutes, and I had a direct link to who I needed to call. I didn't have to go to dispatch and then send here and wonder where I was going. Everybody knew right where I lived because we're all friends. And so you talk about response time, absolutely, and like, so I'm gonna call U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Hey guys, maybe the guy lives in Pocatello. I have no idea where they live. And what are they going to do anyways? They're going to call the Idaho Department of Fish and Game and the county sheriff's office and send somebody out. Well, we had that situation 2 years ago. A friend of mine lives here in the Boise area. He had a grizzly bear come right in his yard over there in Squirrel where I live. And he called the sheriff's office. Great move, actually. The deputy got there, and I'm sure they get a lot of random phone calls, and we got a great sheriff's department in there. And the deputy got there and says, "Oh, it's probably just a black bear." And the guy from Boise here, he's not a bear expert by any stretch either, but he said, "I don't know. It was 2 grizzly bears in his fenced yard." I mean, literally where you mow the lawn, like where your barbecue grill sits. And these 2 grizzly bears were inside the fence of their yard. And that deputy sheriff jumped right in the house with my friend. Oh yeah, he's I guess they are. And they got pictures. They actually posted it on Facebook or something. It was quite a hilarious little. Everything turned out fine. The bears ended up having to be removed later on because of just constant problems.
Right.
But literally, they're in that guy's yard, and the response time was probably 30, 40 minutes to get there. And this guy didn't have a firearm or any way to protect himself. Luckily, he was in his home and used his common sense and was able to be safe. But what if he'd have been out walking his dog 50 feet from the house? I mean, just simple things like this, our response, we can't depend on other people to take care of our problems. We need to,
Yeah.
it needs to be managed better than that.
Is there any movement to give more power to state and local agencies and essentially appeal to the federal government, be like, listen,
Constantly.
Constantly. Is there any movement in that direction? Are people, is the federal government like, all right, you got a point, Brody. Like,
I think U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and I can't speak for these people, but the vibe I have when I go to meetings here is that they're finally realizing, hey, we've met capacity. Like, this is over. Well, obviously they've delisted them twice. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife have recommended having delisted twice. They've done that. And once again, one judge, nope, back on. And how that can happen, the wolves, they were taken off, I believe, with an act of Congress, literally. And I don't know if that's what we're going to have to get to, or if this new federal administration we've got this month is going to be a lot more proactive. I honestly believe they will, but what's it going to take to make this bulletproof like we've done with the wolves? And by the way, with the wolves, 15, 18 years ago, one morning I woke up early, 13 wolves came in my yard, killed my dog. We're still there all morning. Our veterinarian came driving by, stopped, seen the wolves right out in the middle of the county road. The wolves came, put their heads right on the hood of her pickup. She had a dog in the cab. They were pretty interested in that dog. They were zero scared of us. I mean, they couldn't care less that we were there because they were 100% protected. Nobody's ever hunted them. Nobody ever trapped them. They were the king of the castle. And now they've been delisted. They're hunted. Managed fantastic from the state of Idaho's from my perspective on the state. Obviously, I still think we have way too many of them, but I can give you an example. We had one show up in our yard. I pulled the rope on my snow machine to go see what it was, and my neighbor was watching this situation from binoculars. He said the moment I pulled the rope on my snowmobile, the wolf ears picked up and it was heading straight for the timber at a lope. And they can travel. Them wolves, I wouldn't say they're as fast as a grizzly bear, but they can do it all day long. They can just start out, they probably go, don't quote me, 30 mile an hour, and they could run that 12 hours, I'm sure, without even hesitation, in deep snow, not a problem. And that wolf was out of there. And the point of that story, they were scared of us. They've been hunted. They've been trapped. They're well aware of who the king of the castle is now. And so from a management standpoint, it is so much better than it was 15 years ago. We still have depredation. We still have all sorts of problems, but we have the tools to manage it properly. We're still way above numbers on it. You see billboards, save the wolves, don't stop the howl, all these things. And I'm like, do you people just live in Washington, D.C. and listen to this crap? Because we're not stopping the howl. Trust me, that would be a huge undertaking to accomplish it. And nobody, I don't think, wants that necessarily.
Well, I think one really interesting parallel, which obviously I think really took like world attention, was do you remember Cecil the lion? Do you remember that big snafu from like 10 years ago? There was this famous lion that was like well known in Africa in this preserve, and it had been coaxed, or the allegation was that it had been coaxed out of the reservation, and somebody had hunted it and killed it and like posted a photo. It was like a poor dentist from Chicago or something. Bad news for this dentist. Sure. And people lost their minds. They're like, oh my gosh, like save the lions, right? And then this outcry came from these communities that were living adjacent to lions in Africa. They're like, save the lions. Like, my kid got killed by a lion. Like, what are you talking about?
Sure.
Like,
that happened. Did you see the one in Jackson last summer?
No.
That 399 grizzly, don't quote me on the number. Every bear has a number. This bear is world famous. Okay, she's raised, I think she had 4 or 5 cubs last year. Don't quote me on the numbers once again, but multiple. And this bear is literally famous. She has followers that come from all over the world to come see this 399 bear. Well, last summer, around Jackson there, a car came around the corner and apparently hit it. There was a fatality there. The bear died. They had a funeral for this bear. This is no exaggeration. You can look it up on YouTube. I seen it on the news. They had a vigil for it right in downtown Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They had singers come in from all over the state singing hymns and pray. I'm not kidding you. I've seen it kind of made me a little bit sick to my stomach, actually, to see that much effort and expense put into this poor bear, and just the lives that bear changed. And I don't mean to make light of it. If people enjoy that, that's good for them. But literally, I've seen people buried with less respect than this bear was given, and just like immortalized this bear, immortalized it. It was I mean, they had candles in Jackson Hole, Wyoming this summer, holding the vigil. The weather was horrible, and they're out. People flew in from all over the nation that don't fly. I mean, I watched it for 30 minutes, just almost shocked at the amount of effort and emotion put into that, which comes back to why is these things not delisted? Because it's an emotional issue for so many people. That, you know, you talk about that lion. People, good luck finding anybody that showed up to that funeral from eastern Idaho, you know.
Yeah. What is it about, like we anthropomorphize all kinds of animals, right? And it's like, you know, Smokey the Bear and,
Sure.
you know, but what is it about wild animals that used to be understood with a healthy respect of like empirical knowledge? It's like, listen, if you had an opinion on a grizzly bear 100 years ago, it's probably because you knew a grizzly bear was bad news. Right. And like the golden bear, California used to have golden bears, and they're gone now, right? Like that's bad. There was that famous film that finally Leonardo got the Academy Award for, The Revenant, where he gets attacked by a bear. You know, they're for operation, and you know he's out, and that was a real story. So that what people don't know is that bears used to be plains animals, and they got driven into mountain ranges because they started getting hunted and stuff. But you would be in the plains, and you'd have this gigantic apex predator that was hunting down buffalo and other things come after you. But like, what is it about? Do you think it's that we just lack any actual experience with these things, and we see them more in the abstract of like, oh, this bear is so great. Like, there was this really terrible thing that I heard about when I was in college. My rowing coach was like, hey, you ever seen that show Faces of Death? I was like, no, man. First off, I don't have cable. Second, like, no, I'm not spending my day doing that. But there was one instance where this family had seen, they were around a black bear in some national park, and they're like, oh, honey, go put like honey, like they got their kid to go put honey on the head. It's like, the bear will lick it off your head. Well, you can imagine what happened.
Oh yeah.
You know, like just lunacy.
Yep.
Like, these are not cuddly,
not
like
cuddly. It's not that
these are
plate
hundreds of they kill things with their face.
Yep.
Like, their whole point in life is they have these razor sharp claws
and strength
and teeth, and they're going to chase something down, jump on top of it, and bite it to death.
Yep.
That's their whole goal in life.
Right.
And we think of them as these, you know, like cuddly, cool things to have around. And this interface of people that actually have to deal with them, like you, and people that have an abstract concept, like a principled concept of how we should manage them, but have never dealt with them, or never been afraid for their kids, never worried about it. It's like, we're having this clash because we've kind of nationalized our communication platform. So now somebody who lives completely removed from them can pay for a billboard in Idaho, like, save the bears.
Well,
like,
it's eye-opening to me as I got on this commission last year. It was a year ago this month, and I went to my first public hearing, and I sat there, and they just put a bio out about me as the new commissioner, and it talked about as a rancher and a farmer and what some of the accomplishments I've had in my life. And I get to this commission meeting. It looks like we're like the Supreme Court justice, this big, nice, huge thing. There's 7 of us. We have name tags, and I'm sitting there.
I hope you put on a nice shirt.
I do.
Put on a nice shirt.
I tried to put a clean one on.
There you go. There you go.
And try to stay awake. Well, there was no problem staying awake because literally there's, you know, it's quite an entertaining thing to be part of here. And there was multiple special interest groups for wolves, grizzly bears, both sides of a fight, but 99% of them are special interest groups, more on the environmental side of this situation. And some of them, I wonder if I've ever left the city limits of Boise or Ada County, possibly, or, you know, and a lot of them are transplants from other parts of the nation that came out here to get a job, and they're activists for these things, and good for them if they're passionate about it. But like, literally, there is no logic in some of the things that were said. Last year I had a play put on for us. Some kids here in Boise came put a play on. They dressed as wolves, and they put on a play for us. And it was absolutely, I was looking at them like, and it was, you're talking about that Simba or whatever, that lion you're talking about.
Cecil the lion.
Cecil the lion. There was a wolf up in, I want to say it was up in Stanley area, and it was one of the first wolves they released here in the state of Idaho back 1995. I'm a little foggy on some of my details, but the wolf apparently was killed or died of old age. Something happened to it. It's been gone. And they put on a play about it. These kids were emotional about it. And I'm not trying to make light of that. You know, that's their passion. But as I sat there and watched this, and I'm sitting there, and some of these people know I'm a rancher, so automatically they hate my guts because they think I hate wolves and bears, because that's a problem for me.
Right.
And I don't feel that way. I truly don't. But I do have a different opinion than these people that are not using any logic or science to make a decision. You know, any facts. It's just all emotionally based. It's, for lack of a better term, it's almost their religion.
Right.
Truly, it truly is.
This is their,
It's their passion.
This is their passion. This is their thing they're into. Amazingly, like I don't spend a lot of time on social media. I only use it to communicate and post clips of, things that happen here, but I don't consume a lot. And in a brief moment of just thumbing through something, somebody that I do follow had shared a clip of talking about predation and predators in Idaho and depredation and these things. It had a beautiful picture of a, grizzly bear and a wolf and some other stuff. And it kind of had some interesting commentary in the captions at the bottom of the clip. And I was like, huh. So I reached out to this guy. I was like, hey, I'd be happy to have you on my show if you have a position on predation and depth. Like I try to enjoy, I didn't even know what this guy's position was. It seemed that he was a bit of an activist, and it's like, okay, that's fine. And, let's hear everybody out. Right. Cause
absolutely,
turns out he lives in Pacifica in California. I was like, wait, you're not even in Idaho? He's like, my organization, and again, I don't have a problem with this guy, but he was like, my organization goes wherever it needs to go. I'm like, you live next to the beach.
Yeah.
My aunt and uncle live in Pacifica. Like I used to go there when I was in college to get Taco Bell and go surfing.
Right.
Why are you wading into a conversation about grizzly bears and wolves in Idaho? Yeah. And again, it's not like I got a problem with this guy. I don't know him, but just to support
your dog in the fight.
Right. Just to support your position, which is, hey man, have you ever, what if people in Idaho started saying bring back the great white shark and reintroduce the great white shark into Pacifica?
Absolutely.
We're landlocked.
Yep.
You will never see a great white shark in the state of Idaho.
That's a great explanation.
But what if we wanted to bring back great white sharks and makos and, all of these things, or we wanted to, kill sea otters. I don't know, whatever it is, right? That you would have a problem with that, right? And again, didn't get into an argument with this guy. I was just like, okay, well, look, if you're ever in Idaho, let me know.
Yeah.
But it is interesting how attractive it is for people in other states to not just follow arguments or debates or issues, but actually wade into them and make organizations that wade into them, having never lived with a grizzly bear in your front yard. Yeah. It's like, let me tell you what I know about. It's like, yeah, or don't. I don't know.
I don't know what you think because there's no. Yeah, I mean,
could you imagine if we tried to bring back great white sharks?
That's a great explanation. I was thinking whales. We need to kill all the whales. They'd freak out.
No, let's great white sharks are beautiful. Yeah. I saw Shark Week when I was a kid. It was incredible. Nobody's arguing to have more of them on the beach areas, though.
Honestly, I think we ought to.
That we could make our own organization. Think about it. You have a lot of credit. You're a fish and game commissioner. I'm an idiot with a microphone. We team up. And make a save the white shark.
Oh my gosh.
Or save the makos. It would be or save the bull sharks.
Yep.
Bull sharks are great because they can go up freshwater channels as well.
I think there was one here in the Salmon River once. I'm pretty sure. No,
isn't that what Jaws was based on? That there was a bull shark that had gone up the Hudson or something.
I don't remember.
Let's spread that rumor. That's what.
Yeah, seriously. I think they were discovered in the Great Lakes.
Yeah. Brody, listen to me. I appreciate you.
You too. This has been great.
This has been fantastic. Thank you for sharing your position, and thank you just in general for what you're doing for Idaho. I understand that Fish and Game is one of the departments that it's hot. Our recreation and our hunting and fishing are some of the greatest things that Idaho has to offer, not just the state, but the country and the world at times.
Yep.
And structuring that resource and protecting that resource is not something that's an easy thing to do. So I appreciate you taking this job. I appreciate what you're doing for Idaho.
Glad to do it. It's been great.
Let's keep the conversation going.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you.